If the other partner is always triggered by the emotional stress, or maybe there's some trauma they haven't healed yet or dealt with, where they resist it or they just try to lie, like how do you approach that conversation?
Well, I think the thing to do is you have to talk about that outside of crisis. You don't talk about it when something has gone off in the ditch. You never talk to a drunk about their drinking while they're drunk. You talk about it while they're sober.
Yeah.
You don't talk about issues and resentment while you're angry with each other. Talk about it while things are calm. And most people think, no, let sleeping dogs lie. I don't want to bring up an issue when there isn't one. No, that's when you need to talk about it. That's when you need to say, look, while we're getting along, let's make an agreement that if I do something that really gets on your nerves, you will tell me, and I promise to you that I will hear you out. And that's the time to talk about it. Don't try to solve problems during crisis.
Yes.
Make your plan outside of crisis. And I think that's really important. And I think, secondly, we have agreed that our objective when we disagree is not to get the other person to agree with us, but to be heard. In fact, you don't even need to respond. I'm going to tell you how I feel, and you tell me how you feel, and then we'll just walk away and let that sit with the other person. And you know what? If you really love each other and you really want to make the other person happy, most of the time you will find a way to get the other person most of what they want. But if your goal is you're going to agree with me, I'm going to make my point and you're going to agree with me, then you're making it a win-lose situation. And think about that. Think about when you were in high school and you were playing the Lancers. What were the signs in the hallway? Crush the Lancers. Smash the Lancers.
Yes.
Do you really want a win-lose situation with your partner?
No.
Crush my wife. Smash my wife. You don't want a win-lose situation. Let me tell you how I feel. And I just want to be heard. I'll hear what you say, and I'll let you be heard. And then let's drop it at that. And then we can come together and talk about it another time. If that's your objective, to be heard, it will work itself out. And that has really worked for us. We don't put it on a win-lose situation.
Right.
Because if it's a win-lose, one of us is going to be the loser. And I don't want to be the loser, and I don't want to be married to a loser.
Right. You don't always be winning and then your partner losing every time. Yeah.
Yeah, because if she's a loser, that's where resentment comes from.
Yeah. Okay. So that's number 2, right?
Yeah. That's number 2. And I think if people will, and that's a hard thing to do.
Yes.
That's really a hard thing to do because we want to win. We want to make our point, and
we want to be right.
Yeah. We do get to be right fighters, and we want to be right. And the other thing is, I think we really have to resolve that if somebody has to stop being all of who they are to be half of a couple, the price is too high.
Oh my gosh, that's the greatest thing you said. Because so many people are inauthentic in their relationships.
It just doesn't work. If I got to stop being who I am to be half of the McGraws, it isn't going to work. And if she's got to stop being who she is to be half of the McGraw couple, it's not going to work. And I've told her before, because she said, I wish you would be more sensitive. And I'm like, nah, you really don't.
Wow.
You really don't.
Wow.
You think you do, but you really don't. Because you know what? You didn't marry a cheerleader. You married the middle linebacker.
Right.
And not that there's anything wrong with a cheerleader. And I mean that. I'm not saying that to be politically correct. There's nothing wrong with a guy that is more effeminate or more emotionally sensitive at all. There's not. But that's not what attracted you to me.
Right.
And if I became that, that's not who you married. And had I been that, and then I became more of a gorilla, that wouldn't be who you married. You married me, and there's a reason you did. You felt safe with me, or there was something about me that you were attracted to. Don't try to change it now. And there have been times where things went off the rails somewhere, and I stood in the gap, and she was like, yeah, I'm sure glad you are who you are.
Right? Yeah.
Because there have been times where we've been in situations where I needed to step up and be who I was, and she was like, man, I'm glad I married you.
I'm glad you're the linebacker.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But that doesn't mean that you can't evolve across time.
Yes.
And I think I've learned to be less cerebral and more emotional across time. But you can't ask somebody to stop being all of who they are to be half of the couple.
And what happens if your partner starts asking you to change,
Well, if
as opposed to accepting kind of where you're at?
like I have a range.
Yes.
Okay, there's a range where, I'm over here in full Cro-Magnon mode, and there's a range down here where, I can hold the baby. And
Right.
I remember Jay had to have surgery when he was 4 weeks old, and I was on staff at that hospital, and so they allowed me to carry him into the operation room.
Wow.
And she'll never forget that image of seeing me walk down the hallway with his little head right here, and he was kind of crying, and I was carrying him in there, and she said that was probably the most tender scene she's ever seen in her life. That was at this end down here. So, you have a range in there. And so, yeah, you can move within that range. That's okay. But that is who I am. You can move within that range, but you don't ask somebody to be somebody they're not.
Right.
She'll ask me sometimes something like really great will happen. And she'll say, come on, give me something. Give me a happy dance. Give me something. Well, I'm not the kind of person that jumps up and down and yells, hey. But inside, I might be going, yes, this is really great. And it's a great sense of satisfaction to me, but I don't jump up and down and run around in circles. And she'll jokingly say, come on, give me something. And I'll say, I'm very happy about this. She'll say, okay, that's good for you.
Yeah. If she's dancing around and
exactly.
jumping on couches.
Yeah, exactly. And, my highs don't go real high, my lows don't go real low. And maybe that's boring.
You're like Tom Brady. You're just like, you're consistent.
That's all I have in common with Tom Brady. But I'm not real. I'm more cerebral than emotional. But inside, I experience. I'm very happy about it. But I don't run around with my hair on fire. Which is good. So I don't have much of that.
And what would you say are the three things that Robin would say are the keys to a happy, healthy, long-term, thriving marriage or partnership?
Yeah, I think she would say, first off, spending quality time together. I think she really values that quality time, and I think she thinks there's just no substitute for that. And by quality time, I mean intimacy, where intimacy being defined as sharing things that you would not share with anybody else on the world, in this world.
Can you give an example of?
Well, there are times that she and I spend together just maybe out on the patio, relaxed and talking, where, I have, my guard down, she has hers down, where we're just completely relaxed. We're not not in any way.
It's not business mode, it's not TV feel, it's not this.
We're not censoring anything. We're just completely relaxed and 100% candid with each other, talking about, life or family or dreams or whatever, things that we just wouldn't share with anybody else.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to her, that there are things that we would say to each other that we wouldn't say to anybody else because we don't feel safe enough to say it to anybody else.
Wow.
And to me, that's intimacy, when you say and do things with that person that you wouldn't say or do with any other person in the world. Not your best friend, not your sister, not your brother, but it's just reserved for that. It has nothing to do with romance or sexuality or anything. It has to do with just trust and that uniqueness of that one relationship where it would not happen with another person in the world.
Right.
And I think she really values that. I know that because she's said so.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think, and so when I say quality time, that's
Intimacy time.
that's what that means.
Okay. And what do you think would be here number 2?
Having each other's back no matter what.
Even if the person's wrong.
Even if the person's wrong, and that doesn't mean that privately you might not say, we might modify this situation, but publicly or otherwise, that there's never a doubt where you stand.
What happens if you don't, even for a slight little moment, don't have that person's back in a public or friend setting, let's say?
I don't know.
You've never experienced it.
I'm not going to find out.
Right. Right.
And I've never experienced that
Wow.
with Robin, because that's why I told you a minute ago, you don't want to pick a fight with her by getting sideways with her husband or children.
Wow.
Because that's, to her, there's family and everybody else. And that's really core with her. And if you've been raised by an alcoholic, then you understand what I'm talking about. Because when you've been raised by an alcoholic, you learn that you can't depend on the leader of the family to be there.
Right.
And when you become the leader of the family, you say, that will never happen in my family. Not 1 minute of 1 hour of 1 day will any member of my family ever doubt where I stand.
Wow.
And that is core to her soul.
That's beautiful.
That is core to her soul. That will never happen.
That is beautiful.
She's been where they've banged on her door at 3 a.m. with a bunch of drunk men out there saying her father lost their furniture in a poker game. And they pulled up in a truck and wanted their furniture. And she's seen her mother stand on the porch saying, "You're not taking our furniture.
Wow. Even if he was wrong,
It is
she's
like
not, yeah.
You're not taking our furniture." Her mother stood in the gap and said, "You're not taking our furniture. You're not taking my daughter's bed." Wow. And she said she knows what it is to stand by your family, and that's critical to her. That's core to her.
Seems like an amazing woman.
Yeah, she is. And that's why I said you don't want to get on the wrong. You don't want to get on the wrong side of her.
And what would you say the third thing is that she would say, you think?
I think she would say that you absolutely recognize that children, I'll put it this way, when you start being parents, you don't stop being wives, husbands, and lovers. Mm-hmm. Just because you start being parents, you don't stop being husbands and wives. And she has been so great about that over the years. The children joined our lives. We didn't join theirs.
Wow. What is the mistake most people make when they have kids?
Well, they really stop focusing on their role as husband or wife, and they start being totally focused on the kids, and they stop carving out time for each other. Now, there are going to be times when you do, like when the children are really young and you're up all night,
Right.
you're breastfeeding or changing diapers, or dad's getting up every other minute or mom's up every minute, and you're surviving those times. I'm talking about across the years.
Yes.
You recognize that those kids come and then they go. Mm-hmm. And when they go, it's the two
Just
of you
you two
there.
again.
And if you haven't known each other for the last 18 years, when they leave, you're going to be sitting there looking at somebody you used to know.
Ooh.
And you don't want that to happen. If you were really great lovers and intimate and best friends 18 years ago, and you haven't been for the last 18 years, and then they go off to college, you're sitting there looking at somebody like, didn't I used to know you?
Wow.
And I think she would say, you just don't ever make that mistake. Don't ever let that gap come in there. Now, in short term, of course, you sacrifice for your children whatever it takes for them to flourish and be nurtured and do what you take. But across time, across the years, you remember to nurture that relationship between the husband and wife. You remember that they're going to leave someday and it's going to be the two of you. Take care of that relationship so when they leave, you're not sitting there with a stranger.
How can they start to think differently and believe themselves when they've never seen the results or evidence that they deserve more?
Well, I can tell you this. Really small changes accumulate across time.
Absolutely.
And, you and I are sitting here right now in September. And people are listening to this whenever you're going to drop this. And the rest of this year is going to go by whether they're doing something about it or whether they're not.
Right.
Let's say there's 12 weeks left in this year. Those 12 weeks are going to go by whether somebody spends it losing a half a pound a week, setting a goal to look up a college curriculum, to explore a different job, to redefine their relationship with their spouse, to re-engage with their children, to whatever it is, making a small change each week or each day, it's astounding how much those small changes accumulate to big differences in a short period of time. We don't have to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Just make a little difference today and another one tomorrow, and then before you know it, wow, I'm really in a different place.
Right.
And that time's going to go by whether you're doing something about it or not.
Absolutely.
So you might as well be doing a little something.
What would you say is the thing you get to work on to get you out of your comfort zone over the next 12 weeks that maybe you've been, I should be doing more of this, or I need to take a look at this thing or assess this part of my life? Is there any area?
Me personally?
Yeah, you personally. This season of your life.
Next chapters. Because I'm always asking myself, and I know at this stage, my world's supposed to be getting smaller, and I'm supposed to be slowing down, and kicking back. But I still look at expanding my horizons. I'm looking at what is a new chapter I can challenge myself with. And I like to do things I like to take on things that are really outside my comfort zone. Like I mentioned, I'm not good at math. So when I was in graduate school, my teaching assistantship was statistics.
Okay.
Because it scared the bejeebers out of me. So I think I'm only 9 or 12 hours short of a PhD in statistics because it intimidated me so bad. I took every statistic course I could, non-parametrics, parametrics, Malinova's distance, analysis of variance. I took everything I could get because I thought I will not turn away from that. I will take this one, that one, this one, that one. I will not let this intimidate me. But, human beings are human beings, and I got comfortable with that from a very early age, and I was so glad that I did.
Yeah.
And that served me well, my whole life. Whereas there are a lot of kids who grew up where they were never around. They live such a